On Nextdoor, someone posted, "Suspicious woman entering my neighbor's house." It was my fiancé, drunk and half-dressed. My name's Noah, 31 years old, systems analyst, the guy in the neighborhood who everyone forgets exists until their Wi-Fi goes down. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac where drama usually means a raccoon tipping over trash cans. At least, that's what I thought, until a notification on my phone one Thursday night changed everything. I wasn't even looking for trouble. I had just finished a late shift, came home, microwaved some leftover pasta, and collapsed on the couch. My fiancée Julia wasn't home yet. She had texted earlier that she was working late with the marketing team. I didn't think twice about it. Her job at the design agency kept her busy, and late nights weren't unusual. What was unusual was the Nextdoor ping I got at 10:47 p.m. For anyone who hasn't used Nextdoor, it's basically the gossip grapevine disguised as a safety app. People post about suspicious vans, lost cats, or kids knocking over mailboxes. Usually harmless. But the post that popped up made my fork stop halfway to my mouth. Suspicious woman entering my neighbor's house. Looked drunk, barely dressed, carrying a bottle. Anyone recognize her? Attached was a photo. Blurry, taken from across the street under a weak porch light. But my stomach recognized what my brain refused to. The woman in the photo was Julia. My fiancée of 3 years. Same hair, same jacket she'd worn that morning, same curve of her shoulder. I stared at the screen until my food went cold. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was someone who looked like her. But the more I zoomed in, the worse it got. She wasn't wearing the blazer she'd taken to work. She wasn't holding her work laptop. She was clutching a wine bottle and fumbling with the lock of a house 2 blocks from ours. I scrolled down to the comments. There were already 20 replies. Not the first time I've seen her around that place. Looks married. Hope she's not someone's wife sneaking around. Kids live in that house. Sad if true. Half the block had seen Julia before I even knew. My chest felt hollow. I wanted to storm out, drive to wherever that photo was taken, and demand answers. But some part of me, maybe the analyst in me, stopped and thought, if I blew up now, I'd only get lies, excuses, half-truths. If I wanted the truth, I needed to act carefully. I set my phone down and opened my laptop. First step, figure out exactly whose house that was. The post was geotagged. Nextdoor shows a rough location. I compared the pin with Google Maps and narrowed it down to 3 possible houses. Then I looked closer at the photo again. The porch light fixture, the chipped mailbox, the crooked garden gnome. Details I'd passed 100 times walking the dog. I knew that house. It belonged to Caleb, a guy in his mid-30s who sometimes jogged around the neighborhood. Married, no kids, drove a black Jeep. His wife, Stephanie, traveled often for work. The idea hit me like ice water. Julia wasn't just sneaking into some random house. She was sneaking into Caleb's. I pulled up my phone records, checking Julia's messages. Nothing unusual. She'd texted me a cheerful, "Good luck today" at noon. A reminder about dinner plans with her mom this weekend. But then I checked our joint credit card account, something we rarely used but occasionally swiped for groceries. At 9:12 p.m., a rideshare charge. Pick up from her office. Drop off, near Caleb's block. So it wasn't just a lookalike. It was her. The betrayal should have hit like a sledgehammer. Instead, I felt cold, detached, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. My mind began cataloging evidence, connecting dots, building a timeline. Julia left work around 9. Took a ride 2 blocks from our house instead of coming home. Entered Caleb's place drunk and half-dressed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above. Part of me wanted to confront her right then, call her phone, demand she come home. But the other part, the part that knew how Julia could twist arguments, held me back. If I didn't have proof, she'd make me doubt myself. She'd laugh, call me paranoid, turn the tables until I was apologizing for even asking. No, if I was going to do this, I needed ironclad evidence. I went back to the Nextdoor thread. More comments were rolling in. Someone said they'd seen the same woman 2 weeks ago stumbling out of Caleb's house in the morning. Another neighbor mentioned a Jeep parked outside at odd hours. And then one that cut deeper than the rest. Not trying to judge, but isn't she engaged? I swear I've seen her ring at the coffee shop. I slammed my laptop shut. Julia was out there, drunk in another man's house, while half the neighborhood speculated about her ring. About me. About us. If this spiraled, I'd be the last one to know, the idiot fiancé everyone pitted. I paced the living room, fists clenched. Then I forced myself to sit back down. I needed to think, not lash out. I opened a new document and began logging everything. The post, the photo, the timestamp, the credit card charge. A case file, basically. If Julia wanted to lie, I'd have receipts. At midnight, I heard the door unlock. Julia walked in, her makeup smudged, hair messy, the faint smell of alcohol trailing behind her. She kicked off her heels and mumbled about being so tired from work. I watched from the couch, my face neutral, my mind screaming. She didn't even notice the glow of my laptop screen still open. She just dragged herself to the bedroom and collapsed. I sat there another hour, staring at the wall. My fiancé was living a double life, and my entire future, our house plans, the wedding deposits, the family talks, suddenly felt like glass already cracking. But I also felt something unexpected: focus, a grim kind of clarity. This wasn't just about her cheating. It was about how deep it went, how long it had been happening, and what else she was hiding. If Caleb was involved, then Stephanie, the wife always on business trips, deserved to know too. The neighborhood might think they'd uncovered some gossip, but for me this was evidence. And I wasn't going to be the fool who ignored it. By the time I finally went to bed, Julia was snoring softly beside me, completely unaware that I'd already started building a case against her. I didn't touch her, didn't ask questions, didn't give her a chance to cover her tracks. Because now, I wasn't just her fiancé. I was the detective she didn't know she had. The next morning felt like standing on stage while the audience whispered behind their hands. Julia stirred beside me, groaning about her hangover, mumbling something about a late client dinner that went too long. She kissed my cheek, padded toward the shower, and hummed like nothing in the world was wrong. I nodded along, pretending to scroll through emails, while inside I cataloged every false note in her song. It was surreal, sitting across from her at breakfast while she scrolled Instagram, sipping coffee, hair still damp from the shower. She joked about me working too much, teased me about my shirt being wrinkled. A part of me wanted to grab her phone and slam it on the table, demand to know where she really was last night. But the sharper part of my mind, the part that had spent years analyzing systems and spotting inconsistencies, knew better. If I confronted her now, I'd get denial, maybe tears, maybe anger. Nothing useful. Instead, I logged the time she left for work. 8:42 a.m., pulling out of the driveway with her usual oversized tote bag. I sat there for a while, staring at the empty coffee mug, then grabbed my laptop and started digging. First step, the rideshare records. Our joint credit card showed a payment to a rideshare app. Julia's account was linked to mine, though she rarely used it. I reset the password, using a hint I knew she always picked: our dog's name and her birthday. Logged right in. The trip history spread out in front of me like a trail of breadcrumbs. Wednesday, 2 weeks ago, picked up at the downtown agency, dropped off near Caleb's block. Friday, last week, same route. And then last night, timestamped 9:12 p.m., drop off within 2 houses of his address. Patterns. Repetition. This wasn't a one-time drunken mistake. This was routine. I screenshotted everything, backed it up to a private folder on my cloud drive. Then I went further. Julia sometimes used our shared Uber Eats account when she was too lazy to cook. I checked the order history. On 3 separate occasions, meals had been delivered not to our house, but to a side street, Caleb Street. Burgers once, Thai food another time. The kicker was a pizza order delivered at 11:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been working late at the office that night. She'd told me she was asleep early. I felt sick, but I also felt sharper. The kind of clarity you get when a puzzle piece clicks into place. It wasn't just about ride shares and takeout. I opened her Venmo account. Transfers to CJ small amounts, like $40 here, $60 there. Notes like drinks and movie night. Casual, innocent looking. But Caleb's initials weren't a coincidence. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. My fiancée wasn't just cheating. She was funding parts of it. And then it hit me. Caleb wasn't exactly flush with cash. I'd heard whispers at the neighborhood barbecues, late mortgage payments, his Jeep repossessed once before he scrambled it back. Stephanie, his wife, had mentioned in passing that she covered more than her fair share. Could Julia be helping him financially? With my money? The thought made my blood boil. But anger wouldn't help. Evidence would. I spent the next 2 nights quietly building a timeline, cross-referencing rideshare data, food deliveries, text logs. Julia's phone bill showed late-night calls to a number I didn't recognize. I ran a reverse lookup, Caleb's work cell. She'd saved it under Sophie in her contacts. Bold, almost sloppy. By Friday, I had enough to choke a jury. But I didn't stop. That weekend, Julia claimed she was going on a girls' night with coworkers. Dressed up, perfume heavy, heels clicking down the driveway. I waited 5 minutes, then slipped out myself, circling the neighborhood in my car until I spotted her silhouette under a streetlight, headed straight into Caleb's driveway. I parked a block away, camera in hand. Watched her knock once, then let herself in like she'd done it 100 times. Porch light flicked off. Curtains closed. I sat there for 2 hours, every nerve screaming at me to kick down the door. Instead, I documented. Photos, timestamps, license plate shots. At midnight, she stumbled out again, hair messy, laughing into her phone. She walked to the corner, ordered another rideshare, and headed back toward our house. I followed at a distance, heart pounding, making sure she never saw me. When she crawled into bed that night, whispering "love you" half asleep, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might vomit. But it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a conspiracy, and I wasn't the only one caught in it. The next morning, I ran into Stephanie, Caleb's wife. She'd just gotten back from visiting her sister, pulling groceries from her trunk. We chatted casually. She mentioned being away for a couple of weeks. My mind reeled. That matched Julia's activity perfectly. Julia had been circling Caleb like a hawk while his wife was out of town. Stephanie laughed about being exhausted, said Caleb was so sweet for handling things at home while she was gone. I forced a smile, my jaw aching from holding back. I realized then, she had no clue. This wasn't just my fight anymore. Another person's entire life was about to collapse, and she didn't even know the earthquake was coming. That afternoon, I dug deeper into Caleb. Social media, public records, property filings. He'd been late on mortgage payments twice this year. He'd applied for a small business loan and been denied. Credit cards in his name were maxed out. It all lined up. Julia wasn't just cheating. She was subsidizing him. With what? With me. With my income. With the future we were supposed to be saving for. The weight of it crushed me, but it also sharpened my focus. I wasn't just a victim. I was a witness gathering evidence. On Sunday, Julia went to brunch with her mother. I stayed home, pretending to be knee-deep in work projects, but really I was planting quiet traps. I set up a motion-triggered camera above her front door. I mirrored her phone notifications onto my iPad using an old trick from my IT days. Nothing invasive, just enough to alert me when she called or texted certain numbers. At 4:32 p.m., while she was supposedly sipping mimosas, a notification pinged. Text to Sophie. I watched the preview roll across my screen. Tonight? Same time. I nearly crushed the tablet in my hand. She was scheduling him like a business meeting. That night, I didn't follow her immediately. I waited an hour, then slipped out, parking 2 houses down from Caleb's again. Curtains drawn, Jeep in the driveway, Julia's coat hanging over the banister inside the window. I knew she was there. But this time, something else caught my attention, an envelope sticking halfway out of Caleb's mailbox. I glanced around, heart hammering. The street was empty. I walked up, snapped a photo of the envelope, then stepped back. Addressed to Caleb, past due notice from the bank. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The photo said enough. Caleb was drowning, and Julia was throwing him lifelines behind my back. It wasn't just infidelity. It was theft. When Julia came home past midnight, I lay in bed pretending to be asleep. She slid under the covers, sighing happily, smelling faintly of cheap whiskey. My fists clenched under the sheets, but my mind was already moving 3 steps ahead. This wasn't going to end with shouting. This wasn't going to end with me storming out and slamming doors. This was going to end with precision, with exposure, with consequences. And the best part? She didn't even know I was watching. By Monday morning, I felt like I was living in 2 parallel realities. On the surface, I was still Noah, the dependable fiancé, making coffee, fixing the leaky faucet, answering Julia's casual questions with a smile. Underneath, I was Noah the investigator, sitting on a mountain of data that painted her as someone I barely recognized. Every time she kissed my cheek or called me babe, I had to stop myself from laughing out loud. I had proof of her sneaking around, proof of money funneling into Caleb's empty pockets, proof she'd been treating our relationship like a cover while she played house in someone else's living room. The only thing I didn't have was her reaction when caught in the act. I needed to see it unfold. I needed to watch her lies collapse in real time. So I planned it carefully. That night, Julia mentioned working late again. She kissed me quickly and bolted before I could ask questions. I waited 20 minutes, then grabbed the camera I'd been keeping ready in my car. Instead of following her directly, I parked on a side street, walking the rest of the way until I had a clear view of Caleb's house. The street was quiet, one porch light buzzing faintly. The Jeep was in the driveway, hood dusted with leaves. At 9:46 p.m., Julia appeared, striding up the path with her tote bag slung over her shoulder. She wore her work heels, but her jacket was already slipping off, revealing a low-cut blouse. Caleb opened the door, ushered her in like it was routine, which by now I knew it was. I snapped photo after photo, time-stamped each one, then moved closer. My pulse hammered in my ears, but the anger kept me steady. Caleb hadn't shut the front window properly. Through the slight crack, voices spilled into the night. I told him I was working late. He never questions it. Julia's voice. Smooth, careless. Caleb laughed. You're lucky. Stephanie would have my head if she ever caught me. Julia sighed. A sound I'd once thought was reserved for me. She's always gone. You're lonely. I'm comfortable here. He pays the bills, I get freedom. It works. The words made my throat close. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being reduced to a wallet. I stepped back, fingers curling around my phone. Every instinct screamed at me to smash through the door, but I forced myself to stay put. Listen, collect. Then came the sentence that snapped the last thread of my restraint. Don't worry about money, Caleb. He makes good money. He'll never notice if some of it shifts around. The room tilted. She wasn't just covering small expenses. She was bleeding me into Caleb's debts. I moved before I could stop myself. Shoved the door open so hard it smacked against the wall. Julia froze mid-laugh, wineglass in hand. Caleb shot to his feet, face pale. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Julia's voice cracked first. Noah, what are you? Save it, I snapped. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled with fury. I've been tracking everything. The rideshares, the deliveries, the money. You think I wouldn't notice? Caleb stammered something about misunderstandings, but I cut him off with a glare. Julia set her glass down, shifting into her performance mode. You're paranoid. You've always been paranoid. Spying on me. Creeping around like some stalker. She stepped closer, trying to twist the narrative, just like I knew she would. But I wasn't unprepared. I pulled the folder from my jacket and slammed it onto Caleb's coffee table. Photos, receipts, printouts, everything I'd gathered over the past week. Pages fanned out like knives. Julia's face drained of color as she skimmed them. You went through my accounts? She hissed. That's controlling. That's abusive. I laughed, sharp and bitter. No, that's surviving. You've been lying, stealing, and dragging me through the mud while the whole neighborhood watches. Caleb held up his hands like I was pointing a gun. Look, man, it's not what it looks like. Shut up, I snapped. You think I don't know about your late mortgage payments? About the past due notice in your mailbox? About her bailing you out with money she skimmed from me? His mouth opened, then closed. Julia turned on him, eyes wide. You told him? I didn't. Caleb shot back, panic rising. And that was when headlights swung into the driveway. All three of us froze. A car door slammed, followed by footsteps. The front door creaked, and in walked Stephanie, grocery bags in her arms. She stopped dead when she saw me, her husband, and Julia standing in the living room surrounded by scattered papers. The silence was crushing. Stephanie's eyes darted from me to Julia to Caleb. She set the bags down slowly, like she was afraid to spook us. What? She said finally, her voice low and dangerous. Is going on here? Julia opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. Your husband and my fiancé have been having an affair. For weeks. Maybe months. And they've been using my money to cover his debts. The words dropped like grenades. Stephanie blinked once, twice. Then her face hardened. Is that true, Caleb? Caleb stammered, reaching for her arm. She jerked back. Answer me. Julia tried to interject, but Stephanie turned on her like a blade. Shut up. I don't know you, and I don't want to. The room dissolved into chaos. Caleb begging Stephanie to listen. Julia accusing me of betrayal for spying. Stephanie demanding explanations. Voices overlapped, rising and falling, until the sound of my own pulse drowned them all out. I gathered the scattered papers, shoved them back into the folder, and stood. I'm not staying here for this circus. I have everything I need. You two can destroy each other without me. I headed for the door. Julia grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin. Don't you dare walk out. We're not done. I yanked free, my voice cold. We are done. You just don't know it yet. Stephanie followed me to the porch, eyes blazing. Thank you for telling me. I'll handle him. For the first time that night, I almost smiled. At least one of us still had fire left. As I walked back to my car, I glanced over my shoulder. Through the open window, I could see Julia and Caleb shouting at each other, Stephanie pacing like a storm about to break. The perfect little web they'd built was collapsing in real time, and they couldn't do a thing to stop it. But the night wasn't over. Not even close. Because the Nextdoor thread, the one that had started all this, was still growing. And now, with the evidence I had, I was about to make sure the entire neighborhood knew the truth. By the time I got home that night, the adrenaline was wearing off, but the fury still simmered under my skin. I sat in the dark living room, folder of evidence on the coffee table, phone buzzing with muted notifications. Julia still hadn't returned. Maybe she stayed to clean up the wreckage at Caleb's place. Maybe she just didn't want to face me. Either way, it didn't matter. I opened Nextdoor again. The thread that had started all this had grown into a wildfire. What had begun as a blurry photo of a suspicious woman sneaking into Caleb's house now stretched to hundreds of comments. Neighbors speculating, trading sightings, dropping hints that they'd known something was off for a while. It was public court without lawyers. I read through the posts, each one a little dagger. Pretty sure that's the blonde from Maple Drive. Always thought she was engaged to the IT guy. Wait, isn't that Caleb's wife's house? Yikes. Explains why the Jeep's always there when she's not. The block already had its verdict. They'd branded Julia the suspicious woman, and they'd painted me as the clueless fiancé. My stomach turned, but then an idea formed. I uploaded 3 photos, blurred faces, but clear enough to match the porch, the wine bottle, and Julia's figure entering Caleb's house. I captioned them simply, confirmed. Evidence in hand. Please stop speculating, it's true. The replies exploded. Some supportive, some shocked, a few even apologetic for gossiping. I didn't care about sympathy. I cared about control. For the first time in days, I wasn't just reacting. I was steering. At 2 a.m., Julia finally stumbled in. Her mascara was streaked, her voice hoarse. She tried the same routine as always, blame shifting, gaslighting, playing the victim. She accused me of humiliating her by posting in the thread. I told her flatly that the humiliation wasn't mine to carry. She collapsed onto the couch, muttering half-coherent defenses, then passed out. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I froze our joint accounts, called the bank, explained possible misuse of funds, and moved my paycheck deposit into a private account. By noon, Julia was on the phone screaming about her card being declined. I ignored her. Meanwhile, Stephanie called me. Her voice was shaky, but resolute. She thanked me for showing her the truth, said she'd already contacted a lawyer, and asked if I could forward the financial screenshots I had. I sent everything. Venmo transfers, rideshare receipts, food deliveries. She replied within minutes. You've saved me months of guessing. He's not walking away clean from this. That was when I realized Julia and Caleb weren't just facing a breakup. They were facing collapse on every front. Word spread quickly. By midweek, Caleb's Jeep sat abandoned in his driveway, one tire flat. Stephanie had locked him out. A neighbor mentioned seeing him sleeping on his office couch. Julia, on the other hand, found herself under scrutiny at work. Her agency prided itself on professionalism, and when whispers reached the office, fueled by a viral neighborhood thread, her boss called her in. She came home that evening, eyes wild. They suspended me, said I was embarrassing the company. Do you know what this means? I did. It meant her carefully crafted image, bright, ambitious, socially polished, was cracking. And unlike me, she had no backup plan. She begged. She cried. She shouted. She accused me of ruining her life by going public. I sat there calmly, watching her unravel, knowing the truth. She'd ruined herself long before I said a word. The neighborhood didn't let it drop either. Every walk to the mailbox, I caught the stares. Some sympathetic, some pitying, some openly angry at Julia for bringing her mess into their community. She stopped going outside entirely. Her world shrank to our living room, blinds drawn, silence heavy except for the occasional phone buzz she ignored. I wasn't cruel. I didn't scream, didn't throw her out onto the street. But I also didn't comfort her. I became a mirror she couldn't avoid. Every time she looked at me, she saw the man she'd underestimated, the one who documented, exposed, and dismantled her double life without raising his voice. 2 weeks later, Stephanie filed for divorce. Caleb's finances, already shaky, crumbled under legal scrutiny. Rumors flew that his credit cards had been frozen, his job performance questioned. He moved out of the neighborhood quietly, tail between his legs. Julia's spiral was slower, but more brutal. With no job, no fiancé, no friendly neighbors, she leaned on excuses that nobody wanted to hear. Her mother called me once, trying to smooth things over, saying, "Young women make mistakes." I told her calmly that Julia's mistakes weren't just personal. They were financial, calculated, and destructive. The line went silent. She didn't call again. By the end of the month, Julia packed a suitcase. No ceremony, no long speech. Just a bitter look, a slammed door, and silence. I stood in the doorway watching her walk down the driveway, dragging the same tote bag she'd once carried into Caleb's house. Only this time, there was no porch light waiting for her, no neighbor's door swinging open. She vanished into the night like smoke. The house felt cleaner after she left. Quieter. Honest. I updated the Nextdoor thread one final time. Situation resolved. Thank you all for the support. Sometimes the truth takes time, but it always comes out. Then I closed the app, deleted the folder of evidence, and poured myself a drink. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the detective work that kept me sane. And I realized something important. Betrayal doesn't end when you catch it. It ends when you decide not to carry it anymore. Julia lost her job, her reputation, her relationship. Caleb lost his marriage, his finances, his home. Stephanie started over, stronger, sharper, less trusting, but more free. And me? I learned that silence can be louder than shouting, and truth can be sharper than revenge. The neighborhood still remembered me as the guy from the suspicious woman post. But now, when they nodded at me on the street, there wasn't pity in their eyes. There was respect.